2 years ago, Americans watched in horror as a crisis unfolded at the Kabul airport.
There's desperation and anguish.
More than 80,000 Afghans have since arrived in America, but this story is still unfolding. I'm Andrea Smartin. In my new podcast, Stranger Becomes Neighbor, we'll find out what happens to these new arrivals in our communities. Who would help our newest neighbors? Follow us at kslpodcast.com, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else you listen.
In today's episode of Project Recovery,
I always felt like I had to take something to cope with everything. And now I'm there, and I feel like I can parent in a healthy way.
make sure you listen to the end. Find us on Facebook at Project Recovery. We'll have that and much more coming up. Hey, welcome to Project Recovery, a podcast about addiction. More importantly, it's about recovery. It's brought to you by our friends at useonlyasdirected.org. They got a three-part solution: speak out, opt out, and of course, throw out. They're getting ready to change the narrative, and it's know your script. We'll tell you more about that as they roll it out. But it's just a way to talk to your doctor, to talk to your kids, to talk about your families, about your prescription. So preventative maintenance is really what we're going for on this podcast rather than, reactive. And so that's what we're going for. Did that make sense, Dr. Matt?
Oh, yeah. I've been preaching that line for a long time. I feel like people should be much better consumers of their own health care in general, mental health especially, but also any prescription that you get. It's your responsibility to understand it. And nowadays, you don't have an excuse. When you and I were kids, it was hard for parents to know about what the prescriptions meant.
Yeah.
But you can look anything up nowadays. So I'm excited about their campaign.
It's not often that I'm going to dispense fatherly advice on this podcast because I don't think I'm in no place to do that.
Oh.
But I do got one piece of advice that I tell all my kids.
Yeah.
Well, I tell them two things. I say, do something every day that scares you. And they go, why, Dad? And I go, so then you know you're alive.
Okay.
And the other thing is question everything.
Yeah.
When we were kids, we were not supposed to question everything.
Right.
We just, back when I was a kid, if my dad or mom said because I said so, that was the end of the discussion.
Right.
Because you're like, oh, mom and dad are bad now.
Yeah.
Because they can't combat me with any knowledge, so they're just going to go, because I said so. And I went, oh, okay.
Yeah, we didn't know that. We thought they knew everything, but in truth, they were just covering up.
Yeah, they're like that. That's when you knew you were winning the argument.
Right.
Because I said so.
Because they said so, you're like, I won.
So, but I tell my kids, question everything. Not to an obnoxious point,
Question authority.
Well,
down with the man.
No, but there is some. The younger generation.
I agree.
The younger generation wants to know why. They are. But why?
Do, and we live in an information age where they are raised in an environment where they can know almost everything all the time. And that wasn't how we were raised.
Like in my house, if we didn't know the answer, we went to a thing called the Encyclopedia Britannica.
Yes, we had one too.
And we didn't have the whole set. So we had to either have it be like an R, an S, a P, and I think we maybe had an M and an N.
I think we had the whole set, but for the listeners, I grew up as a kid mostly in the 80s. Mm-hmm. And according to our Encyclopedia Britannica, Kennedy was still alive. Because I think that's how old it was.
Yeah.
It's like 62 or something.
Those were the things that were passed down from generation to generation.
Right.
Here's your Encyclopedia Britannica.
Right. And if it's, if you're doing a report on ancient Rome, you're good to go. In my household, if it was on the, landing on the moon, you were in trouble because that hadn't happened yet, according to my encyclopedia.
I'm with you. Hey, I want to talk a little bit about last week's episode because I think on this podcast, if I've got my numbers kind of correct, we've done about 75 episodes.
Yeah.
And we've had some amazing stories and people sharing insight and stories of hope and all kinds of cool things. But this last week's episode has sat with me every day since we did it. And it was amazing because I think it just puts a point on addiction being a family disease.
Right.
So much energy is exerted on the addict themselves that a lot of times the family members that went through this horrible time with them didn't really get any love or didn't figure out how to deal with their feelings and the aftermath. And when Shelley told her story, I could see my ex-wife in her eyes so many times. And it just made me think about some of the stuff that I did. And it put just a fine point on it.
Well, you were kind of unlike your normal self at the end of that episode because when you and I are doing an episode, we kind of can tell if it's going well. And I knew that you thought it was a great episode, but you were somber. which
Yeah.
is not a Casey trait.
No.
You're not down. I wouldn't say you were sad or anything, but you're just kind of somber and reflective, and I could tell that's what was going through your mind.
And I think I want to do a little bit more of that on this podcast, is show the whole side of addiction, because we do focus a lot on the addict, and I think that's important.
Of course.
In the recovery process. But the family, it's so important.
It's a family disease, and Shelley did a great job of illustrating her side of the story, but also we got into elements of her two boys and how it affected them. Their father not being present for big things in their lives, like going to college and going to try out for Major League Baseball and those kinds of things, how much they did on their own without a dad who was present because of his addiction.
And the other point that was interesting was the mother-in-law, the father-in-law, her parents, the second go-around when she didn't tell them because they didn't want to get dragged through the mess again, you know? And so she was kind of in isolation herself. She couldn't talk about it. But we forget that when we're this family unit, that it's not just us. I mean, there's so many people.
Extended family, too.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it was just a very powerful episode. If you haven't heard it yet, go back and download it.
I think that's why I've had more people reach out and comment to me personally on last week's episode than a lot of our episodes. I think it's because that episode did highlight this family system of addiction.
And we're lucky enough to get good guests week after week, like our guest this week. We got Diana Harrison. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Now, Diana, we've been planning this episode for about a month.
Right.
And you reached out to me. You said, I've got a short story. I want to tell it. And I was like, perfect. We've got a platform. And when I was talking to you yesterday and we were talking about you coming down and getting all the stuff in line, you were telling me that you were just listening to last week's episode.
Yes.
And you said that it really brought home a lot of feelings to you because you lived with an alcoholic. You were married.
I did. I lived with an alcoholic, and there was so much of her story that really resonated with me. She talked about being gaslighted and talked about how he said she was crazy. You know, he made her feel crazy. There were so many times that I felt like I was crazy. I'd walk in the house and I could smell it. And he'd be like, "You're just smelling things. I haven't drank anything." You know, and I was like, "Oh, am I really smelling things?" You know, and I did. I felt like I was going crazy. I felt like I was being pushy, and I so much of that resonated with me.
But off air, you were telling me that you would have conversations with your ex-husband and couldn't understand addiction.
Yep. I was like, "Why can't you just stop? Why can't you just quit?" And he's like, "I don't have a problem." I'm like, "Yes, you do." But I didn't understand it. I couldn't understand why all these things, bad things kept happening, and he couldn't stop.
But that brings us to your story.
And it does bring us to my story.
So let's get with your story. How does your story start?
Okay, so, well, I had a great upbringing, great parents.
Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Brigham City.
Brigham City, Utah. Okay.
Yeah. My parents got divorced when I was 7, but I love both my parents. There was no drinking, no drugs, anything in the home. It kind of started in high school a little bit. I became bulimic at the age of 17. And
can I ask a little bit first, just your parents divorced when you were 7?
7, mm-hmm.
How many siblings did you have?
I
and
have
what kind of changed
4 siblings.
4 siblings.
Yep.
Where do you fall?
I am the second to youngest.
Okay, so you had a couple older siblings to sort of cushion that family change.
Right.
What affected that? Because some divorces are pretty smooth, and one of the parents moves a block away, and the others are very chaotic, and one parent moves to New Zealand or something. So what was it like for you?
I was sad. I was 7, so it was like my dad was, I was like a daddy's girl. So when he moved out, I was really sad about it. But he lived in town.
Okay.
We had visitations with him every other weekend. It was, I think, harder a little bit, like on my older ones, like they knew a little bit more that was going on than I did. But, I kept a really good relationship with both my parents. So it affected me in a way that I just didn't understand. I was like we were the first family in our neighborhood who had a divorce. For
those people that don't know, Brigham City still today isn't a very big town, right?
No.
And so that's everybody. Did it feel sort of like everybody knew everybody to some degree when you were growing up?
Mm-hmm.
And so what was that like being the first of your friend group to have divorced parents?
I had to explain it to people. They didn't understand, like I remember like trying to explain it to my friends. My dad's moving out, and they were like, "Oh, okay." And I'm like, "They're getting a divorce." And my little friends didn't know what that meant,
Right.
And I didn't really know what it meant. I didn't know that it meant they weren't going to be married. So it was hard, but I feel like, we all dealt with it pretty well. So other than that, it was, both my parents have been amazing, both very involved in our lives and understanding and helpful and caring and kind. And
Okay.
yeah.
But in high school, you said you kind of had a problem with bulimia.
I did. Some guy made a comment to me.
How old were you at that time?
I was 17, and it kind of just affected my brain. And I tried just not eating for a week, and that didn't work. So I remember just pigging out and going and making myself throw up. And I was like, that was easy. And it became kind of like a coping mechanism for me. Everything I ate, I would throw up. I wouldn't even binge necessarily, and I'd be having a rough day, I'd throw up, So.
How did that make you feel when you vomited? How do you feel right afterwards?
Oh, relief. It's like a.
Is there an endorphin rush that goes along with that, Dr. Matt?
Yeah, there's a sense of euphoria that comes, and part of that's, from our primitive brain. It's an evolutionary thing that helps, technically the reason the body can throw up is to get rid of poisonous or detrimental substances in your body, right? Mm-hmm. And so there's a sense of, typically when our body does something that keeps it moving and alive, there's a reward response. So when you eat, you get a little bit of euphoria, right? When you sleep, you feel a sense of refreshment. And when you vomit, there is a sense of euphoria afterwards. And so, like you said, when you had a hard day, it started with the food, but then for a lot of people, it becomes a coping mechanism for emotional things. That's a way to, oh man, I feel terrible today, I feel awful. Going to go eat something which makes me feel good, and then I'm going to throw up, which makes me also feel good in a different way. And it becomes this coping mechanism cycle, which, of course, is very unhealthy very quickly.
Right. Yeah.
And so you kept that up throughout high school?
I kept that up for about 18 years.
Wow.
On and off. When I would get pregnant, I wouldn't. And breastfeeding, I wouldn't. And there were times that I could go months. There were times that, I think I went like a year while I was pregnant and breastfeeding, not doing it. But then once that was done, it was easy. It was back to it. It was a way for me to cope with stress and to lose weight. And, I hit it really well. And
did it create any physical problems for you?
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, that extended amount of time, almost 2 decades of binging and purging, what did that do to your body?
It has ruined my gut. I have gastritis. My teeth are ruined. All that acid, it has my teeth are so weak and they break and they, it's.
A lot of people don't realize that purging on a regular basis can damage permanently your stomach, your esophagus, the back of your throat, your teeth. All of those things become damaged by that repetitive process. Right. And most people who recover from bulimia still have to deal with those things for the rest of their life. Yeah.
So did you eventually seek help for bulimia?
So I did, kind of. So it got so bad, it was about, I think it was 2015. It got really bad. It was out of control. I was throwing up all day, and then my teeth started kind of breaking. So then I started using laxatives, and I was using probably up to 20 laxatives a day.
Whoa!
Because your body gets used to them. So it was, that started that, and so I finally called my mom. My mom's my go-to. If something's wrong, I'm going to call my mom.
That's what moms do best.
Yep, and she's amazing. And she took me down to the hospital at McCady. They tried to get me into behavioral health unit, and they didn't treat that. So,
which has got to be frustrating.
It was so frustrating. And then they just set me up with a therapist, and I went for a couple weeks, and I kept on doing it, and then I cracked my rib, and I couldn't throw up, and I stopped. But I didn't ever really seek the help for it that I needed. I just stopped, and then I started doing other things to cope.
It's
Did you crack the rib vomiting?
No.
Oh, okay.
I was boating.
Boating. Okay.
Yeah, I was
because
boating.
believe it or not, Casey, I've known several patients who vomit to the point where they have cracked and broken ribs because of the impact that has. But anyway, I just wondered.
Well, here's a little side story for you. I used to chew tobacco for 15 years. I got jumped by 7 people and got my jaw wired shut, and that's how I quit chewing.
Well, that's one way to do it.
But I can, I mean, you know, it was
An injury,
something happened, and it sounds something similar to yours. So then all of a sudden you stop, and you said that's when you got into other things. We're going to find out about that in just a second. You're listening to Project Recovery right here on KSL.
A gun in the face.
Then all of a sudden they all kind of lined up. They pointed their guns at me. And this is the point where I thought, I'm going to die today.
Started 2 years of horror for an American in Venezuela.
They said, you need to give us your phone and get ready because you're coming with us.
I'm Becky Bruce, and I spent a year researching and piecing together Josh and Tammy Holt's story about their ordeal in a notorious prison.
That's when everything started to turn bad. We had another pound on the door. Boom, boom, boom. And there was the police once again.
You can binge all of the episodes of Hope in Darkness on kslpodcasts.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to Project Recovery. Our guest today is Diana Harrison. We just heard about her bout with bulimia, and she said that came to an end when she cracked a rib, not from purging, but from an accident, and that just stopped. But you said that started something else. What was that?
Pills. Pills. And I kind of had dabbled a little bit. I had surgery, I had a hysterectomy in 2012, and they sent me home with like 60 pills. And I was like, oh, I like these.
Do you remember what kind of pills they sent you home with?
They were Percocet. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so, I mean, they were pretty strong, but I took them as directed, one every 6 hours. But I took them when I didn't need them, too. So I was like...
So after the pain had subsided, you were still continuing on with the prescription.
Right. But once it was done, it was done. And I think I got like one more fill, and then I was done, and I was fine.
And you didn't search for it after that?
No, but I ended up having another surgery like 6 weeks later.
How old of a person were you at that time when you were having that?
I was 32 when that happened. So then I had another surgery and I got more. And then I was like, I really like these. And it scared me. It scared me enough that I didn't seek them for a while, you know. And I was married to my second husband at the time. He was an alcoholic. That kind of started my bulimia, the really bad part of it after I left him, is that's how I kind of coped with that. Well, then I got with someone else. It was a super toxic relationship, but I started having some other health issues, some neurological problems. Do you think
that was a result of the bulimia or just kind of...
I really think a lot of my health issues are a result of my bulimia. I really do. And I've asked that question multiple times, but no one's ever given me a straight answer. Well, it could be. But I really do think a lot of my health issues are because of that. Mm-hmm. So I was really tired. I was fatigued. It was hard for me to get out of bed. It was hard for me to get anything done, go to work. And he had a prescription for Adderall. And he's all, here, try this. And I was like, oh, my gosh, I have energy. And I got so much done. I'd go to work. I was working like 60 hours a week. And then I'd come home and clean and be a mom. And I was like, dang.
Wonder Woman.
Yeah. I'm like, where has this been all my life? So I kept on with that. I ended up getting a prescription for Ritalin for myself.
And how did you get that prescription for Ritalin? I mean, did you go in and tell people what's going on with me? And then they said, well, this will help. Or did you ask for that?
They were testing me for MS at the time. They thought I had MS. I don't, thank goodness. I really don't know why I was so tired, probably just working a lot of hours and stuff. So while I was going through the test, she's like, I'm going to give you something for energy to help you. And that's when she didn't know I was taking Adderall. You know, I was taking my boyfriend's. And so she gave me my prescription for Ritalin.
And for the listeners, Adderall and Ritalin are both stimulant medications, and so they do same things.
Would it be the same kind of thing as like Percocet and Loratab?
No, Percocet and Loratab.
No, I mean, but like, Percocet is like a Loratab.
Oh, yeah. They're both in the
Ritalin's
same family of drugs, yes. So the Percocet and Loratab are in the opiate, pain management, and the other two are in the stimulant methylphenidate class.
So he started giving you Ritalin, and you liked it.
I liked it, and I was prescribed 2 a day, which is plenty. It's probably more than one was fine, but I was taking about 4 or 5 a day.
Wow,
and
that's a lot.
Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah. Yeah, for adults with Ritalin, they are going to not prescribe extended release tablets. So if you're a parent and you have a child on Adderall or Ritalin, they probably take 1 capsule in the morning, and the technology allows it to kind of happen throughout the day. They don't do that for adults, and they typically will recommend an AM and an early afternoon dose, PM dose. So you were more than doubling your dose, so that's a lot, yeah.
Yeah. And it kept me awake, and it kept me, being the super mom I thought I was and the best worker. And then he hurt his back, and he started getting Percocets. And he started kind of just handing them to me, and I chose to take them. And that's when I realized I like the feeling of that.
Why did he hand them to you?
Now that I look back on it, I really do believe there was a lot of manipulation there. He knew I was addicted to the Ritalin. And he knew that I kind of liked the pain pills in the past. I kind of told him. And I think it was kind of like it ended up becoming a really bad manipulation, like control of so many things in my life.
When I was drinking and I would go to the bar and I'd go there with my ex-wife or something, I would end up buying shots for everybody. And my ex-wife would be like, why are you doing that? Stop it. You don't even know them. And I would do that. And I can tell you now why I was doing it. It made me seem like the fun guy because I'm buying everyone shots.
Very popular.
But in my head, if they're doing a shot, I'm doing a shot, and there's nothing wrong with me doing a shot then. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Is that, misery loves company.
Yeah.
And so if I can get you doing it with me, I don't feel so bad about
it's like
myself.
Permission.
Yeah, I don't feel so bad
keep
about myself.
partying.
Because if I were to go up there and get a shot by myself, not as cool. You know what I mean?
Yeah, if you're just doing shots by yourself, people are going to be like, that guy has a problem.
Yeah, that guy's up there doing a shot.
Yeah.
But if I go up there with another guy, we're just having fun.
Right. Okay.
And so, and I don't know if that's what your boyfriend was doing, but sometimes I think there's a lot of that in there where it's like
justifying your own behavior by roping other people into your dysfunctional behavior. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you said it was a very bad, toxic situation and a lot of manipulation.
A lot of manipulation. And
can I ask, were you drinking alcohol also when you took the opiates?
No, I was never, I drank with my alcoholic husband a little bit, and then I kind of just stopped. The smell of it started to make me sick. I had an aversion to it. 'Cause so much bad happened in that relationship that just smelling it was like, So I wasn't a big drinker, no. Mm-hmm. Very rare. So I wasn't using alcohol, but.
And so just for context, so the person you're with now that started giving you the opiates, that's your third significant relationship. You weren't married, but you'd had 2 marriages prior.
Right.
How old were you when you got married the first time?
I was 20.
Okay. And did you have any children there?
I had 3 amazing kids.
3. Okay. Yeah. Amazing. That's good. I like to say that about my kids too, but I think only 2 of them, 50%. No, I'm just kidding.
And we're not going to tell you which.
They're not. Trust me, they're not going to listen to my show anyway. Yeah. And how long did that relationship last?
My first marriage?
Uh-huh.
I was married to him for 8 years. Okay. And we just were young. I got pregnant. And
20's pretty young to get married, yeah.
Got married, and we had a total of 3 kids. And we just were friends. There wasn't that passion or anything.
Okay.
And the marriage ended, and then
And was there substance abuse as a problem during that for either of you?
No, it was actually, there was no. We would drink every once in a while, but it wasn't an issue. It wasn't every night. It wasn't even every weekend. It was,
just occasionally.
Yeah,
kind of like Casey likes to say, drinking like a
gentleman.
There you go.
Yeah. Did he know about your bulimia?
He did, but he didn't know the extent. He knew I'd had a problem with it, but he didn't know I was still doing it.
I think, and you tell me if this is your experience or not, but a lot of people are most of the time people are very private. There's a lot of shame involved with bulimia, and so they hide it. And then most other people aren't very educated on it. So a significant other, a husband or boyfriend or whatever, and guys do this too, so it could be a girlfriend who's the other person. They don't know enough, and they don't realize the damage that it does and the addictive process that can happen with bulimia. And so, I think if you told him, I'm not doing it anymore, he'd probably just believe you, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so you're with your, let's see, I'm trying
These
to figure.
relationships
First
are getting
husband.
Crazy.
No, this is the second husband.
No, that was the first husband. Have we gotten divorced yet?
And they got divorced.
They got divorced, yeah.
And so now
In the story,
she's with her boyfriend, who's a
I
toxic.
know, but I wanted to hear about the second one first.
The second husband?
Yeah.
I think he was after the first boyfriend.
See, we got to be linear in our timeline.
Okay, so we have the
So first husband, got married at 20, 3 kids, 8 years, good friends, not a lot of drinking, but bulimia was still happening. First husband's kind of like doesn't realize it because you're not being straightforward with him.
Right.
And then you guys end on good terms after 8 years, like relatively, sort of?
Yeah, relatively.
Okay. And then how long before you get married again?
Less than a year.
Less than a year.
Yes.
So you're right into the second relationship and married the second one. And the second husband
is the alcoholic.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Okay, Casey, we're on the
I'm
same
on board.
page.
Okay.
But I think this is important. I'm not just trying to be
you're good.
Difficult, but I think for the listener and for myself, it's important to kind of know, okay, what was her progression in everything that happened in her life, and so I think it's important to know that we go on to the second husband. Well, can you tell us why, after 8 years of marriage and 3 kids, a lot of people would be like, I want a break, from that whole marriage thing. Why do you think you jumped right into a second marriage in less than a year?
I think I didn't know how to handle anything. I was like, ooh, being single mom with 3 kids, and I struggled, and it was like I didn't know how to handle life,
Were you
by
working?
myself. I was working, but
what sort of job did you have?
I was working. It was called R.R. Donnelly in Logan, and it was a milling plant, and you just took the mill off the conveyor belt and put it in these things. It was very tedious and boring, but I worked graves, and that's how I met him.
Okay.
So, yeah, we started dating, and I kind of went, I dated for about a couple months. Other people, had a little wild phase, would go to the bar on the weekend with my friends, but...
The White Owl?
Yes, the White Owl. The White Owl, yeah.
I've been to the White Owl.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
Casey's a Logan veteran.
Yeah, the White Owl. So, but we got together really quick. I thought he was just this amazing person. He was so nice. He was so kind. He was caring and loving, and I was like, oh, my God.
And by this age, though, you're still young. I mean, you're 28, right? I mean, you're still young. How old was he?
He was 39.
Ah, so he's got a decade on you.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I thought, okay, we're good.
He felt maybe like a mature, stable partner because I think a lot of times age masks for maturity, right? Like a lot of times younger people date older people, and they're like, oh, they're 10 years older than me. They must have their act together.
Not always.
Yeah. So, and he was going through the same thing I was, a divorce. He had 3 kids, so we just kind of...
Brady Bunch.
Yep. We were the... We called us... We called us the Brammer Bunch because that was his last name. But
I like that. The Brammer Bunch.
The Brammer Bunch, yeah.
And so how long were you married to second husband?
6 years. 6 years, something like that. I should know this.
We don't know, so let's just say 6.
Yeah,
we can all agree on it. Everybody raise your hand.
But throughout that, it was evident that he was an alcoholic.
Oh, very much so.
And what ended that one?
The alcoholism.
How soon into it did you realize there was a problem with drinking?
Within 2 weeks.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. He
And what sort of problems were there?
He slept with my bridesmaid.
Oh, yeah, that's a problem. In your living room.
Yeah.
I think that's a
red
no-no,
flag.
right? It's
Yeah.
a red flag, yeah.
Yeah.
So there was, and her and I are great friends now. I love her to death. I'm
that's
a
good.
very forgiving person, but she's
That's
an
actually
amazing
great.
person.
You can
I love
salvage
her,
that
but
friendship, yeah.
we all make mistakes, and she was
kind of a big
came
one,
forward
though.
to me, but yeah.
Yeah.
So 2 weeks into the marriage, there were already big problems.
Big problems, and there was a lot of drinking. And
Are you both working graves?
at this time, I was not working. He was working, and I was not. at the time. I was just raising my kids at this point. And, it was drinking almost every night. I noticed that he was wanting a beer or 2 or 10 or, and then whiskey, and things just kept happening, bad things. Like, he ruined a love seat because he urinated on it, and he kicked me out one night and told me and my kids were pieces of trash, and things like that. And our first anniversary, went up to Park City, and he got drunk. Every time I went to the bathroom, he would go up to the bar and take a shot. We were supposed to be going home, and he was trashed. And he told me that morning, he's like, you have a couple mimosas, I'll drive. So at this point, I'm like, I'm not getting behind a wheel. I've had a couple drinks,
Mm-hmm.
And he ended up getting behind the wheel. He had fallen asleep in the car. I was eating something at some restaurant, and I went back to the car, and he was passed out. And he starts the car, and he starts driving, and I'm screaming at him, please pull over, because he is swerving. I'm like, we're going to die. And he pulled over into a gas station, and I got out, and I went into the bathroom, and I tried calling my dad, and then I got a hold of my friend, and I went back out to the car, and he was gone.
Oh, wow.
He took off. He took the keys. He turned off my phone. And luckily, I was able to get my phone turned back on, had a friend come rescue me, and he passed out on a mountaintop somewhere. That was the first year. And then it just progressed into, he got alcohol poisoning one night, had to call the ambulance, and sitting in the hospital, and they're asking me what he's overdosed on, because it was such a high alcohol, level in his blood. They thought he had taken drugs,
Wow.
And one night he hit me, and it was so, but I kept staying, and I kept saying, he'll stop, because he kept saying, I'll stop.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't. And
what was the effect of that on your kids?
I really tried to shield my kids from that. They were pretty young, and they were with their dad. Like, we've kind of split custody, so they were with their dad half the time and me half the time. So I really tried shielding them from it.
But it sounds like there was a lot of acting out and chaos at home with, the couch cushion and the hitting and all of this. I mean, do you think your kids knew what was going on? Were they exposed to some of it?
My oldest did, for sure. My youngest, he was just little. But she knew. His boys lived with us. They knew. In fact, they're the ones that told me a lot of things that he would hide. Oh. So, which was, like Shelley said, you feel crazy. You feel like I'm going insane, like I'm just being paranoid. And, and then after I left him, his sons told me, oh my gosh, he had a stash downstairs, because I would be searching the house for his alcohol, and I could never find it. I'm like, okay, I am crazy.
And I think, of course, when you're married to someone, you want to believe the best in them. And a lot of times, I think an accurate way to think about your intimate partner is that, the other person you're with has many different aspects to them, sort of like pieces in a puzzle. And many of those are great and wonderful, and those are the things we connect with when we first are attracted to them and want to commit our life with them. But then as time goes on, you might start to find that some of these puzzle pieces don't really fit, or they're broken, or they're missing. And we realize that there are aspects of our partner that are not healthy and aren't changing and aren't improving, but we keep often going back to wanting to believe in just the pieces that are healthy and good and that fit. And so it's easy, I think, for a person in that phase of a relationship to feel kind of crazy and feel like, I shouldn't think the worst of them. Mm-hmm. I'm not finding the alcohol in the house, so maybe it's just me. Maybe he's not drinking as much as I think. And especially if they're complicit in that gaslighting of your perception, then it's easy to start to feel some guilt even. Did you feel that way?
I did. I felt so much guilt, and I felt like I had caused so much of it. And I thought I brought all this stress into his life, and I keep hounding him. And, when he was sober, he was amazing. But...
And that's the tragedy of an addictive disease, is that it takes an amazing person and devolves their personality into something that they don't want to be and that we have a hard time accepting that they are.
Right.
You're listening to Project Recovery. We're talking with Diana Harrison and just kind of finding a little bit about her story and her addiction. We'll be right back. Hey, welcome back to Project Recovery. So, Diana, we've talked about your second marriage. You were in it for 6 years. A lot of times on this podcast, there's a straw that broke the camel's back or something that made you change. What made you change? What made you get divorced?
We had I got on the bank account one day. We had separate bank accounts. He always suggested that, and he left his open one day, and I saw how much money was being spent at the liquor store. And I'm like, we have no money, and you're spending all this on liquor? And that was kind of like a bit of a wake-up call to me. I'm like, I can't do this anymore. And it took me a couple months, but I found this strength, and it was harder for me to leave because of my stepsons. But I was done. I couldn't put myself or my kids through that anymore. And so I did. I found my own place and got out. And it was hard.
And how long until you jumped back in the dating pool?
Very quick. Very, very quick. Like, probably. I found out he was dating somebody, so I was like, well, screw this. So I did. I started dating almost immediately, like within a month or two. I was just like, I was very devastated over leaving that relationship. It was a very hard choice to make, and I wanted to fill that void.
Right after your first marriage and right after your second marriage, you got right back into dating and significant relationships. Can you describe like how that feels for you when you're not with a partner?
You know what? I've had moments where I've not been with somebody, And
how does that feel?
I did great, granted, I was using a lot of pills and stuff, but, I can do stuff. And I knew, I'm like, I don't need somebody. There was a time that I was like, I'm just going to be single for the rest of my life, and that's okay.
How long did that time last?
It's such a blur because this was a big part of my pill usage. Mm-hmm. And so...
Would you consider yourself codependent in relationships?
I was, for sure. I was. I'm in one now, but it's different. It's the tools I've learned in recovery, and the way we went about our relationship was completely opposite than I'd ever done in my life.
Okay, so a healthier approach.
Way healthier. Mm-hmm. There was we didn't have even, we'd see each other at NA meetings, but,
yeah,
we talked and we got to know each other. And
I think we're getting a little ahead. So now that we're back to speed, you're in a toxic relationship with your boyfriend. You were taking Ritalin, and he was introducing Percocet, and that's when you found out you really liked the feel of Percocet.
I loved the feel of it. I just felt calm. I felt relaxed, but it almost gave me energy for a while too. Not like the Ritalin did, but I still was like, I felt like I could talk to people, and I wanted to talk to people. It was very strange, and I just liked feeling that euphoria, that, just calm, and everything's chill, everything's good. And
Dr. Matt, a lot of times on this podcast we'll have people say that they like to feel that euphoria. But for me, it was almost a numbing feeling. Oh. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Is that I think sometimes they get, miscommunicated that way. It's like, I'm feeling this euphoria, but I'm just not really caring.
Yeah, I think there's people who fairly quickly become addicted or dependent on opiates, have an underlying level of natural anxiety. They feel a little bit more tense than the average person, and they can usually trace it back to childhood. And so when they take that numbness takes away some of that anxiety, and so they feel kind of relaxed, and they feel like, oh, this is what it's like not to have that tension in my body. And like you said, it's easier to talk to people and feel relaxed. But it's definitely a numbing. That's the intention of that medication being used for pain killing, is that it numbs your physical tension, and anxiety has a physical component. It's not just a mental thing. And so, unfortunately, people who have anxiety are probably at a little higher risk for developing a dependence on it.
Now, you talked about your boyfriend manipulating you with the Percocet, and it kind of got you back into the Percocet world.
Oh, yeah.
But how did that end up?
So he started giving them to me, and then he kind of would be like, if you'll have sex with me tonight, I'll give you one. And I'd be like, okay, and I didn't want to, but I wanted the pills. So I would do what he wanted to do, or I'd have a night with my kids. It was supposed to be my night with my kids. And he'd be like, if you have your ex keep your kids and come over, I'll give you a pill. And I would.
Now, he was your boyfriend, and you'd been dating for how long at this point?
We had been dating for about a year.
Okay, so you've been dating for about a year. He's your exclusive boyfriend. Why didn't you want to have sex with him?
I wasn't attracted to him.
Why were you with him?
Codependency.
Okay.
Somebody there, and I saw very quickly a side of him that I didn't like. But by that time it was like I had these pills.
He had you kind of hooked on
Yeah,
them.
I was, yeah. And then I started stealing them from him because he wouldn't give me them anymore. And so I would steal them. And then he started counting them. And then one day I was like, just stop getting the pills. You don't need them anymore. Stop getting the pills and we won't have a problem. But he kept getting them. And he would never take them. Every once in a while he would take them, but...
He was using them to control you?
Yeah, it was a very...
Was he selling them or just to control you?
Just me. And I would steal a lot of them from him. So he kept getting those. And I kind of just spiraled. And then in 2017, I started having this horrible pain in my chest. I'm like, I'm having a heart attack. Went to the ER and I found out I had pancreatitis.
What is that?
So it's like your pancreas gets inflamed. It's alcoholics get it a lot.
It's because it's been overworked and damaged. And,
Yeah.
Okay.
It's inflamed and
Yeah.
swollen. Yep.
So you thought you were having a heart attack. Unbeknownst to you, you have pancreatitis.
Right, which is painful. So what do? They give me pain meds. So now I have my own. But they would give me like 20. And I would take 20 in 2 days.
So 10 a day.
Yeah. And then I would supplement with his. So that went on for quite some time.
And this was in 2017.
Yeah. And then my mom ended up having hip surgery that year. And they had given her a prescription of Percocet before her surgery. And the day she went into surgery, I went to the store and I found some Tylenol that looked like the Percocet. And I went downstairs and I dumped hers out and I put the Tylenol in it and I took all of her pills. And that's when I was like, who are you? What are you doing?
So the thing you hated about your ex-husband, you have now become.
I have now become, yes. Hiding, stealing, lying, and...
Had anybody talked to you about your behavior? Did anybody have an inkling of anything you were doing?
No. Just my boyfriend at the time. He knew, but no one else did.
Well, what about Mom? She probably found out.
She didn't.
She didn't.
Well, I ended up telling her. She knows now.
She knows now. She managed that pain with the Tylenol.
Well, she went into surgery and they gave her more. So it was like, and she didn't like them. So I'm like, she'll never know. She just won't know. And she didn't know until I told her. But
gotcha.
And so now you're using, stealing, manipulating, switching. How long does this go on for?
This goes on until about the summer. It was June of 2018. And me and my boyfriend at the time got in a super big fight. He had kind of weaned me down, which I was grateful for. Like, he was giving me like a couple a day, and then I wasn't really getting him anymore. I would have bouts of pancreatitis, but not that they would prescribe me, a lot of pills.
But you never resulted to buying on the street?
No, I didn't. I bought some from friends and family, but I didn't ever go out to the street. I was so scared to go to jail.
Yeah, no.
I was terrified.
Sometimes fear's healthy.
Yeah, it's very healthy. But so 2018 happened. He, like right at the beginning of summer, and we got in a huge fight, and it was done. It was done. The relationship was over. I moved in with my friend.
Who broke up with who?
I broke up with him. I was done. Was
he physically abusive with you?
He was not, but so emotionally.
Oh, very.
By far, even being with an alcoholic, that relationship was by far the most toxic to me. And just...
Well, he was preying on you, in a kind of sociopathic way by manipulating you and controlling you for sex and other things, I assume, with the pills. So
right.
That's a very, very unhealthy relationship.
Yeah.
That the problem with those kinds of things is other people don't see it. If you come home with a black eye and people see that, but they can't quite see this other sort of sick psychological manipulation.
Right.
So you decide you're done, you're out, you're moving with your friends.
I'm moving with my friend, and I'm like, okay, no more pills. But I had muscle relaxers. So I technically was still, not completely off pills. I was and that's kind of, I think, what helped me through withdrawals was taking those muscle relaxers. And I went about 2 months, and he called me one day, and he's all, can we just talk? And I'm all, no. I said, no. I said, I can't. I said, I don't want these pills. I don't want this relationship. It's toxic. It's not good. He's all, can we just talk? And I agreed to talk to him. And he showed up, picked me up from work. And I opened the door, and he's holding a pill in his hand.
Oh.
And took it.
That is some seriously sociopathic behavior. I don't really know another way to say it, but that is very, very predatorial. That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
So you took the pill and you're back on?
Back on for about 2 weeks. 2 weeks, and then I go back to that behavior of stealing them, and then him manipulating me. And he cut me off completely one day. I had stolen probably 10 in a day. And he's like, just cut me off. And at this point, I'm begging him, please don't leave me, because I'm like, I need these pills. I need these pills. And he wouldn't talk to me. So I left, and I went to my friend's house that I had moved in with for a while. And I told her, I said, I think I have a problem. I think I'm addicted. And she's like, just move back in with me, and, I'll help you through this. And I did good for about a month. And then I had about a pancreatitis again. Went to the doctor, and she prescribed me 5. And they were gone in a couple hours. I took all 5 of them within a couple hours. And then I would go back to her, and then find other doctors. And finally, she said to me, I'm going to put you in pain management. And I was like, perfect. Because I knew I had a problem, but I still wanted to use them. So I thought, if I go to pain management, they'll be controlled. It'll be controlled. I'll have to pee every month. They'll do pill counts. And so I thought, this is perfect. And at this point, I'm like, I'm going to be on these the rest of my life. And this is the way that I can control it. So I was pretty excited to go to pain management.
It felt like sort of a safe way to use, I guess.
A safe way to, yeah.
Your
thinking.
Yeah.
Yep. And so
how was your experience with pain management?
Not good. So I go to pain management the first month, and this time I go in there with, I'm not going to ask for Percocet. I'm going to tell them I don't want Percocet. And I didn't say that I loved Percocet. I said, I really hate Percocet, so could you prescribe me something else? And he prescribed Norco. And I was like, hey, I got this. And I got a prescription of $90 a month. And, that first visit, it was they had to test my urine, and, I signed the contract. And within 2 weeks, I had taken all 90 pills. So then I end up back to that place where I know I can get more.
The boyfriend?
The boyfriend, yep. And that went on. You know, I would do this almost like every month for a while, where I was just like, I know where I can get them, and I would go back.
So when your regular supply ran out, you ran to the boyfriend.
Mm-hmm. And then I was so freaked out by, he had, at this time, oxycodone. So I was like, they're going to see that in my urine. So I would take his for a couple weeks, and then I found other people that had the same prescription as I did. I would ask around. And then I would use those for a couple weeks, or a week or whatever.
Trying to fool the test.
The test. Well, they never did a urine test on me. They never did a pill count on me.
Really?
There was no. Very interesting.
That's part of the program. That's what they're supposed to do.
They never did that. Only that very first visit.
Wow.
So then I just started getting away with it. And I think I went back to him, I think, maybe one more time, and he was out. His doctor wouldn't give him any more. So he was out, and I was like, hey. And then I found other sources, you know.
Were you getting them by asking, or were you stealing at this
point?
point? Or?
I wouldn't steal. Well, I stole from my mom, I think, again. She had, some left over from her surgery, so I stole some of those. But I would ask, and I would go to people, and I could put on this show, I'm in so much pain. And I would tell people they're only giving me 10 a month at pain management. So I made people think.
So you manipulated your friends and family and got them feeling sorry for you.
And I had about 2-3 people that I could get them from that, would feel bad enough for me that I was like, I had my supply. And then in July, what do you drink? In July, it got so bad. I got my prescription. I went through 90 in a week.
This is July of 2018?
2019.
So this had been going on for well over a year.
While. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So July of 2019, I take all 90 in a week.
Oh, my goodness.
Mm-hmm. And then I get myself by for a while. And then people wouldn't give them to me anymore. So I was completely out. And I went to bed. I took my last pill that I had, and I was like, okay, you have 2 weeks till your fill date. You have 2 weeks. You can do this. And I woke up, and withdrawals were starting. And I laid there, terrified, scared. Nobody knew, And I'm like, what am I going to do? I've been lying for so long. What am I going to do? What am I going to tell people? And then I was like, no. And I'd pray. I'd be like, oh, God, please help me get through this. Help these withdrawals to not be bad. And by morning time, they were getting really bad.
What symptoms did you have?
Super bad anxiety. My stomach, I felt like somebody was squeezing my stomach. So sick. I was starting to sweat. My eyes were starting to pour water, every classic withdrawal symptom. It was coming. And I finally just said a prayer. I was like, you know what, God, please help me to get help. And I walked upstairs. I was living in my mom's basement at this time. I walked upstairs and I walked into her bedroom and I shut the door and I said, don't judge me, but I'm addicted to pain pills. And she's like, I had a feeling. And so that started the process.
So what happened then?
So she said, okay, we're going to get this figured out. And she got right on the phone. She called Bear River Mental Health in Brigham City, and she talked to a crisis worker. And they're like, bring her in. So I went in, and the guy's telling me, okay, let's meditate. And I'm all, I can't sit still. I'm twitching. I'm sick. And I'm trying to breathe. And I was like, this isn't helping me, He's like, well, we can't get you in to see anybody for 12 days. And I'm like, what am I going to do? And at this time, they have a rehab in Brigham now, but they didn't have that. So I was like, what am I going to do? He sent me over to the ER. And part of me went to the ER thinking, oh, they're going to give me Suboxone. They're going to give me something that will help me through this. He refused. He absolutely refused. He gave me clonidine, blood pressure medication.
Sure.
Yeah, and that was it.
So the ER doctor could sense that wouldn't be a good thing to do, and so gave you a clonidine to just help calm you down a little bit.
Yeah. And then so he called a rehab in Ogden, tried to get me in to do a medical detox, and they couldn't get me in. There was no beds available. And so I went home and I started the withdrawal process.
On your own?
On my own, with my mom.
Wow.
So it was insane. It was, and I'm so glad it was. It sounds crazy, but I'm so glad my withdrawals were so bad.
Why is that?
Because I can go right back to that place and know I don't ever want to be there again.
Kind of made an indelible impression on your mind.
A huge impression.
We've had people on the podcast say, I welcome death. I fear withdrawals.
Yeah, I think the withdrawals from opiate addiction, most people have told us that they would prefer to die.
Yeah, and there was a moment that I wanted to. I just thought, I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to do this. And I'm trying to find help, and there's no help. And I'm going to have to go through this on my own. And there was a time that I thought I was going to have to do it all on my own.
And so you're there in your mom's house, and you're detoxing, and you're just very, very miserable. Frankly, just for the listeners, if you don't try to detox at home on your own, it can create permanent damage or death, right? In this case, it doesn't sound like you had much of another option, unfortunately. How long did that last, that detox for you?
So they found... I started detoxing on a Friday, and by Saturday I called down to that rehab, and I was like, can you please find me a bed? I cannot do this. They're like, I'm sorry, but... And they had me go down to the ER to be checked, make sure I was okay. So I went back down to the ER, and at this point I was like, the clonidine made me so weak and dizzy.
Yeah.
And I could barely go up the stairs. Sounds kind of crazy, but this was what it was. There's no bathroom in my mom's basement. I was peeing in a bucket because I couldn't get up the stairs at night. Like I couldn't call for my mom, and I didn't want to wake her up, so she brought me down a bucket, and I did. And I remember just thinking, this is horrible. This is the worst ever.
Yeah.
So I called again, and they said, come in on Monday, and we'll get you into detox. So I go down Monday, still dang miserable. Every day got a little better. So go in, so ready to medically detox, and they tell me, oh, you're like 4 days in, you're good. We're not going to.
They didn't want to admit you, huh?
No.
Oh, jeez.
No. And then they found out what insurance I had, so they said, we can't even have you come to rehab.
So they said
here.
definitely not, right? Yeah.
So I was like, here we go again. And I left just feeling so defeated. I'm like, I am begging for help. I'm begging. I mean, please help me. I cannot do this without some help. And it was like I wasn't getting it. And I called my friend who had been to rehab, and she's all, call my rehab. And I did. I called Action Recovery in South Ogden. And the lady on the phone, she was so nice. She says, come in at noon, and if we can't get you in here, then we will find a place for you before you leave.
Dr. Matt, you know who that lady was?
Who's that?
Lizzie Dankers.
Really?
Yes.
Yep.
Oh, very cool.
She's on a podcast that we had probably over a year ago.
Right.
An amazing story.
Amazing.
But Lizzie got you in.
Yeah.
Thank goodness for people like that.
Absolutely.
And so how long did you spend in Action Recovery?
I was there 5 nights a week from 5 to 9:30 for about 7 months, a little under 7 months. And I went to the continuing care program, which I'm in now. And so I go down once a week. And then I do NA in Ogden too. So I still keep but oh man, that place saved my life for sure.
What about it was so helpful to you besides the fact that you're in a program, and that's obviously helpful, but did you connect with any, we call them modalities of treatment? Was there anything in their program you really connected with where you were like, oh, that helped me?
The 12 steps were huge for me. I loved the 12 steps. My counselor, Rick Visser, is amazing. He, he'd be harsh on you, but he would get you to see things inside yourself that you weren't getting. Well,
I think a lot of people don't understand there's a lot of different kinds of therapeutic approaches for therapists and a lot of different backgrounds of who the therapist is. But substance abuse, addiction recovery therapists are tough, and they have to be in order to break through all the BS that the person's bringing in, all the lies. Casey, you've talked about, your therapist kind of calling you out, and I've sat and listened to some of these therapists talk, and I'm like, man, they're tough on you.
Well, because here's the thing: is that being an addict, you get good at manipulating, you get good at lying, you get and very good at it to where you can just fool about anybody. And so, imagine being a therapist. And your day is just inundated by people trying to lie to you. So finally they just go, hey, look.
Yeah, I wonder what that would be like.
So they finally just go, listen, stop it.
Right.
I'm not going to hear it. You're not only the first guy to tell me this, you're the 8th guy to tell me this today. And I'm not listening to it anymore. And just stop it. And there's got to be some abrupt, just conversation had.
But it sounds like you connected with that. And I'm just going to go out on a limb here, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that harsh approach, that like nailing stuff, catching you when you're lying, calling you out on your stuff, was also backed up with a sense that he cared about you and wanted you to get better, right?
Oh, absolutely, 100%.
Yeah, and it's that magic combination that these addiction therapists have that you sense the love and the support and that they're on your side. But man, they'll see right through your BS pretty quick.
So what does life look like for you now?
Oh my gosh, my life right now is so amazing. I have so many people along this journey. I have to thank my kid's dad. He took my kids on 5 nights a week, while I did my thing, And I've always said addiction is you have to be super selfish, You're selfish. You have to get yourself better. And
well, most people will say if you don't put your recovery above everything else, then you lose everything else.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And my kids are amazing. My kids have been my little cheerleaders. They'll come to NA meetings and be involved and ask me questions. And, they've learned a lot themselves about this disease. In the last year, they probably get sick of me talking about recovery so much. But
how old are your kids now?
I have a 20-year-old daughter, Trinity, and she has a little baby, Baker. So I'm a grandma.
Oh,
yeah,
congratulations.
He was born while I was clean, which was amazing.
Exciting. Yeah.
Amazing. And then I have a 17-year-old daughter, Taya, and my son, Kyson, is 14.
And so I think a lot of people who are in the active throes of their addiction, they're worried so much about how it's going to affect their kids, and they try to hide it from their kids. But the reality is your kids want to be proud of you, and they want to be your cheerleader. When you're in recovery, most people would say that they finally are developing the healthiest relationships with their kids that they've ever had. Would you say that's true for you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. My patience level with them is amazing. I'm present. I'm there. I'm not doing anything that I have to do this to cope with how you're acting or behaving, Mm-hmm. I always felt like I had to cope, take something to cope with everything. And now I'm there, and I feel like I can parent in a healthy way. I was always there for them, but I wasn't, I wasn't fully present in their lives when I was on pills. I wasn't.
I can relate to that 100%, and I'm so glad you stopped by to tell your story. Dr. Matt, one of the things, I love a lot of things about this podcast, but the thing I liked about today's podcast is that we had Diana come in, and she was coming in for what I thought was her story on abusing opioids. But throughout the whole story, we find out there's bulimia, there's codependency, all these things that play a factor into it that I don't think a lot of people realize. They think, well, it's just this. Well, very rarely in addiction is it just one thing. And, a lot of times in recovery, they're going to tell you the addiction is a solution to a problem you have. And if you don't go back and address and deal with those problems firsthand, chances of you going back to that solution are pretty likely.
Very high.
And so when you look at someone like Diana who came down and talked about these stories, we went far as back as when her parents got divorced when she was 7, and then did the chronological, timeline. I mean, a lot of those things played into the factor of to where she is today. And I think that's what's so powerful about this podcast is that it shows all different aspects of addiction.
Well, I really appreciate you coming in and sharing your story. It's really like Casey's saying, it's your life story, right? It's not just a story about opioids, but it's your life story. And it's a beautiful thing to be able to open up and share your life with our listeners and with us. And we appreciate that because you can see how, like you said, Casey, addictions aren't, they don't exist all by themselves, that they exist in a context of a person's life. And I think what's really great about this show is, and Diana, you're a perfect example, is we get to see not only does a person come in and talk about their journey and their how they've become sober, and they're in recovery, but like all the other aspects of their life that also click and come together. People whose recovery is permanent and they can say, I'm in long-term recovery, and my relationships are better, my codependency's been addressed, I don't have eating disorders, my mental health is overall better. Typically finances improve because you're being responsible with your money. And so I appreciate you shedding that light of hope for other people who are they probably relating to different aspects of your life story. And so we appreciate that. It's very inspiring for our listeners and for us.
Yeah, so thank you very much.
You're so welcome.
Serious question. Did you ever think you'd talk about peeing in a bucket on a podcast?
No.
I think if you ever tell this story again, I think to class that part of your story up a little bit, we call it a chamber pot.
Yeah,
right.
Can we do that?
So, I love that.
It's the Home Depot chamber pot.
Look at Matt bringing his big brain in. Hey, thanks again for stopping by today and listening to another great story right here on Project Recovery, brought to you by our friends at useonlyasdirected.org with a 3-part solution: speak out, opt out, and throw out. Don't forget, Project Recovery is a KSL podcast.
The contents of this program are for informational purposes only. The program is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician, licensed therapist, or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you've heard on this program. KSL does not recommend or endorse any specific tests, physicians, products, procedures, opinions, or other information that may be mentioned on the program. Reliance on any information provided on the program is solely at your own risk.
2 years ago, Americans watched in horror as a crisis unfolded at the Kabul airport.
She was tear-gassed and beaten.
Images of thousands desperate to escape Taliban oppression filled our news feeds. More than 80,000 Afghans made it to America. But the story didn't end there.
It was very cold. There was no power, no heat.
Who would help our newest neighbors? I'm Andrea Smartin. In Stranger Becomes Neighbor, you'll hear the stories of some remarkable refugees who left their homes and their dreams behind, only to start over from zero.
Their only possession was 3 blankets.
And you'll meet Americans who stepped up to help them.
You want me to come when you deliver your baby.
What can one person do in the face of an international disaster decades in the making? That's Stranger Becomes Neighbor. Find us at kslpodcast.com, follow us on Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else you listen.